Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
It was late on a Friday night, and the television was flipping between cable news networks, Fox, CNN. It did not really matter. The world seemed to be in turmoil. What has happened to this world? Gary said aloud. Has everyone completely lost their minds? He switched the channel to WBNS TV 10 in Columbus, Ohio, to check the local weather forecast. Although Gary almost never went outside, except for occasionally sitting on the porch, he still liked to know if it was going to rain. The timing was nearly perfect. The weather forecast was scheduled to begin after a few commercials. Sitting on the couch, Gary reached for a half-empty bottle of Jack Daniel's whiskey that was sitting on the coffee table in front of him. As he poured himself another glass, a new advertisement began to play on the screen. It was for JWB and Porter Carlson, attorneys at law, based in Columbus. They specialized in accident and personal injury cases and also practiced divorce and family law. Gary had always felt a strong dislike for Porter Carlson. For years, whenever he heard one of their advertisements, he would invariably shout at the television, "Jace Ballard and Porter Carlson, getting rich by chasing ambulances and ruining marriages." He often referred to Jace Ballard as the pretty boy of the law firm, since Jace was younger and considered quite attractive. As usual, Gary tried to ignore the ad until something made his heart sink. He suddenly heard a voice he had not heard in over 20 years, but one he recognized instantly. His attention was drawn to the screen where he saw a well-dressed Jace Wellington Ballard hugging a striking brunette who was speaking about the firm. Jace ended the segment by saying, "You have listened to me and Porter all these years. Now, listen to my beautiful wife." Gary's hands trembled. Instead of pouring his drink into the glass, he lifted the bottle and drank almost everything that was left. He stared blankly as the happy couple exchanged a brief kiss on screen. He no longer cared about the weather forecast. He stood up, intending to sit on the porch steps. As he opened the door, he nearly lost his balance and stumbled against the concrete threshold. The alcohol was rapidly overtaking him. Inside, Gary's mother stood quietly in the kitchen, watching her son. She wanted to cry, but there were hardly any tears left. She no longer knew how to help him. He had been in a downward spiral for more than 20 years, drinking, barely eating. He had lost nearly 95 pounds. Silently, the woman walked to her bedroom and lay down. Gary Arthur's first day of high school in the fall of 1970 was filled with nervous tension. He was 6 feet tall and weighed only 135 pounds, tall and slender. His black hair did not hang down neatly, but stood out wildly around his shoulders, as if he had touched an electric socket. A thin black mustache gave him a distinctive appearance. Although many of the boys in school also had long hair, Gary still felt out of place. As the teacher began the class, she instructed the students to choose a partner to work with, preferably someone of the opposite gender. While some students paired up with friends of the same gender, most tried to follow the instructions. Gary felt someone tap his shoulder. He turned around and saw the most beautiful brown eyes he had ever seen. "Hi, I'm Maria. Maria Searle. Would you like to be my partner?" she asked with a warm smile. It took Gary a moment to gather his thoughts. Still looking directly into her eyes, he managed to reply, I'm Gary. Gary Arthur." "Yes, of course." That was how it all began. They quickly became close friends, and eventually, a couple. They were inseparable. Wherever one was, the other was not far behind. In their junior yearbook, classmates voted them cutest couple. They became local legends in their small town in southern Ohio, often seen driving around in Gary's bright red 1969 Chevrolet Chevelle. Their days were filled with joy and simplicity, and their relationship seemed ideal. Because their birthdays were both late in the year, Gary and Maria were 19 years old by the time they graduated from high school. In their senior year, Gary still stood at exactly 6 feet tall, but had gained some healthy weight, reaching about 150 pounds. Maria, by contrast, was 5 feet 3 inches tall and weighed around 105 pounds. She had a petite and graceful figure, and her dark brown hair fell just above her shoulders. Gary still sported his signature wild black hairstyle. Many of the boys at school secretly admired Maria, but they kept their distance, understanding how close and committed she was to Gary. Everyone knew that their bond was strong and that any attempts to come between them would be futile. Their friends and families agreed that it was only a matter of time before they got married. Less than a year after graduation, Gary and Maria tied the knot. They had both waited until marriage to become intimate, and they were delighted to explore this new chapter of their relationship together. After getting married, Gary cut his hair, although he still managed to look as though he had just come out of an experiment involving static electricity. He found work with the local street department. The pay was modest, just slightly above minimum wage, but the job offered solid benefits. Maria became a secretary at a local insurance agency. With their combined income, they were able to live comfortably. 2 years later, they welcomed their first child, a boy they named Joshua. Gary and Maria were overjoyed. 2 years after that, their second son, Jacob, was born. Realizing that their family was growing, they decided it was time to find a larger home. They had been renting previously, but soon discovered a charming older house in a good neighborhood. It had 3 rooms, a full basement, and an attic where the previous owner had started building out an office. The house had great potential. After purchasing it, Maria decided to enroll in evening classes at a local university that offered programs for working mothers. She took a short course in business management. Upon completing the course, Maria considered finding a higher-paying job. Gary initially insisted that there was no need for her to change jobs, as their current situation was stable. But Maria argued that a better salary would allow them to renovate their new house more quickly and turn it into their dream home. Her determination eventually persuaded Gary. By the time they had been married for 6 years, Maria had visited the local employment office and submitted her resume to several companies. She interviewed at 3 different places and ultimately received a job offer to work as a secretary to the CEO of Cutler Industries. The new position paid 70% more than her previous job at the insurance agency. She submitted her resignation and began her new role 2 weeks later. Her new boss, Steve Martin, was in his late 50s. He was married and had 2 sons in college, one attending Indiana University and the other enrolled at the University of Pennsylvania. Steve's wife, to whom he had been married for 25 years, was a homemaker and was content in her role. Since Maria was only a few years older than their sons, the Martin family treated her almost like a daughter. Gary and Maria began spending a few evenings each month having dinner at the Martins' home. One night over dinner, Steve asked Gary if he was happy with his job at the street department. He offered to speak to the Human Resources Department at Cutler Industries if Gary was interested in working there. Steve assured him that the salary would be higher than what Gary was earning at the time. Gary responded that he would think about it, although he genuinely enjoyed working for the city. On the way home, Gary said to Maria, "I think I'll stay at my job. I'm comfortable there, and the salary is not bad. Besides, we are doing fine. We are not struggling to pay our bills or anything like that. Maybe in a few years, I'll reconsider." Maria agreed. The most important thing to her was that her husband was content with his work. When the Christmas break began, the Martin family's sons came home to spend the holidays with their parents. As soon as they met Maria, a bit of sibling rivalry surfaced. Both young men flirted with her openly. Maria was flattered by the attention, but made it very clear that she was happily married and not interested in anything inappropriate. Steve, their father, quickly realized what his sons were doing and decided to speak to them privately. He said, "Maria is like a daughter to your mother and me. I see the 2 of you acting foolishly around her. What you do at college is your business, but you both know she is a married woman. I thought your mother and I raised decent, respectful young men, not the kind who interfere with other people's marriages. I do not care about your personal relationships when you're away from home, but I expect you to respect boundaries here. Leave married women alone." That was enough. The Martin boys respected their father deeply and took his words seriously. From that point on, they treated Maria like a sister and even became good friends with Gary. Gary and Maria had a strong marriage. They were close and affectionate, and although they faced the usual everyday challenges, they were genuinely happy together. Their sons were growing quickly. One was already in his teenage years, and the younger one was close behind. In 1990, 15 years after Gary and Maria's wedding, and after Maria had worked for 9 years at Cutler Industries, the company expanded by adding a new division. Naturally, this expansion brought in new employees. The new division's headquarters were located next to Maria's office, and a new manager and secretary were brought on board. Maria quickly became friends with the new secretary, Debbie Nolan. Debbie was 35 years old and married to Mark Nolan, the owner of a regional supermarket chain that had 15 branches across 3 states. Mark was often busy, working long hours, sometimes 15 hours a day. Debbie took the job simply to have something to do during the day. When Maria first visited Debbie and Mark's home, she was amazed. She and Gary had worked hard to improve their own home and were proud of it, but compared to Debbie's, it felt modest. Their house was located 2 miles outside the city in one of the new upscale neighborhoods. It was a 200-square-meter home, only 7 years old, and full of luxurious features Maria had never seen in person. Both Debbie and Mark drove Porsche 911s. His was black, hers white. Maria drove a full-size 1984 Chevy Caprice Classic, and Gary drove a 1977 Chevy Monte Carlo. Seeing the contrast stirred something unfamiliar in Maria. She began to feel a quiet jealousy, something she had rarely experienced before, except in the past when another woman had been too forward with Gary. Maria was especially curious to meet Debbie's husband. Debbie was tall, about 5 feet 7 inches, and had long blonde hair that reached halfway down her back. She carried herself with confidence and elegance. Maria imagined Mark to be similarly young, stylish, and attractive. After all, she thought, such a woman must have a fitting partner. One evening, during a visit to Debbie's house, Maria was taken aback when a short, balding man entered. At first, she assumed he was Debbie's father. He was about 5 feet 3 inches tall, noticeably older, and wore a business suit. He was nearly bald, with only a bit of gray hair on the sides. "Maria, this is my husband, Mark," Debbie said. "Mark, this is Maria. She works with me at the company." "Hello. Nice to meet you," Mark said warmly. "I'm glad Debbie found a good friend. My work schedule keeps me away more than I'd like." He kissed Debbie briefly on the lips, then turned and shook Maria's hand. "I'm heading to the club for a while. Would either of you like to come along?" Mark asked. "Maria, you're welcome to join us too." No, Debbie replied. "I just want to relax at home tonight." "You won't be long, will you?" "No, I don't think so." Bill and Frank want to discuss the possibility of opening a new store somewhere in Indiana. They believe it's a smart move since there are only a few small markets in that town. "We'll just have a couple of drinks and talk through the options. I'll try to be home early. No later than 9:30 or 10. See you, dear." "Nice to meet you, Maria," Mark said before leaving. He stepped out quickly, and soon the women heard the sound of his Porsche driving away. "He seems like a nice man," Maria said. Debbie rolled her eyes and gave a slight chuckle. "Can you keep a secret?" she asked. "Of course." "I think so," Maria replied. Debbie leaned in a bit and said, "Just look at me. Do you really think someone like Mark is a good match for me physically?" Maria looked at her in confusion. "I'm 35 years old, and I could attract almost any man I want," Debbie continued. "Mark is 49, noticeably shorter than me, and significantly heavier. He barely has any hair left. Yes, he's kind and generous, but that's not the only thing that matters in a relationship." Maria didn't respond right away. She had never met anyone who talked so openly about their marriage in this way. She had seen things like this in movies, but hearing it in real life was something else. "I appreciate the lifestyle he provides," Debbie added. "You've seen the house, the car. That's why I'm married to him. I do what I need to keep things stable. I care for him, support him, and I'm loyal in the ways that count. That's enough for both of us." Maria was still a bit stunned by Debbie's frankness. Then Debbie asked, "So what about you and Gary? Does he treat you well? Are you happy with your relationship?" "I have nothing to complain about," Maria answered honestly. "He's always loved and supported me." "Is he the best partner you've ever had?" Debbie asked. "Is he the only one you've been with?" Maria blushed slightly. "Yes, he's the only one," she said softly. Debbie looked at her in surprise. "Wow, I don't think I've ever met anyone who waited until marriage. But let me ask, how do you know it's great if you've never had anything to compare it to?" "I don't need to compare," Maria replied. "What we have is real and meaningful." "Fair enough," Debbie said, smiling. She didn't push the topic further. Later that night, Maria went home feeling uneasy. She had a restless sleep, troubled not by regret, but by a quiet sense of comparison. She tried to dismiss it, but Debbie's words lingered. Maybe it was time for Gary to consider that job offer from Steve at Cutler Industries, a position that had been available for a few years. She knew it paid significantly more, and perhaps with that increase, they could afford a few more things. She didn't want luxury, but maybe something modest like a newer car. A few days later, after a quiet evening together, Maria brought up the topic. "Have you ever thought again about taking the job at Cutler?" she asked. Gary wasn't thrilled. "Why? We're doing fine. We've got everything we need. We have enough for ourselves and the boys. We live in a nice neighborhood, we're not in debt, and we're comfortable. Why change anything?" "I know. I'm just saying, maybe it would be nice to upgrade a few things," Maria said gently. "Debbie and Mark both drive Porsches, and I'm not saying we need that. but I would love to get a newer Jeep Cherokee or something. With winters being so tough here, it would be safer and more reliable." Gary interrupted. "What's wrong with our cars? They run, don't they?" He was practical by nature and believed in the saying, "If it isn't broken, don't fix it." "I just think it would be nice," Maria said. "Not flashy, just dependable and more comfortable." "I'll look into it," Gary said thoughtfully. "We can probably find a good used one we can afford. But as for switching jobs, I like where I work. I don't want to go to Cutler." Maria let it go for the time being. But after a few more visits with Debbie and further comparisons in her mind, she brought it up again. This time, it led to the most serious disagreement she and Gary had experienced in their 15-year marriage. Gary stood firm. "We've had a great life together. Why risk changing that? If I were to switch jobs, I'd consider working at Zime where Jack, my younger brother, works. He knows people there and could probably help me get in." James Wilkins' home was located in Willow Creek Estates. Maria, Gary, and their sons had driven past the area before but had never actually entered or explored the houses there. On the day of the barbecue, when they finally arrived, Maria could hardly believe her eyes. The house was enormous, elegant, modern, and beautifully maintained. Compared to it, her former boss Steve's home, though nice and filled with character, looked old and modest. It was located in the city center, not in one of the newer residential developments. Steve and Gary had many things in common. Both were frugal, practical, and not drawn to luxury. But standing in front of this grand estate, Maria couldn't help but feel a pang of longing for something more. James had invited the entire office staff along with their spouses and children. The invitation also mentioned that guests were welcome to bring swimwear since his backyard featured a large heated swimming pool and a jacuzzi. A certified lifeguard would be present, so parents could relax while their children swam safely. Gary hadn't been enthusiastic about the idea. He wasn't a fan of extravagant gatherings. But their sons were excited about the opportunity, and for their sake, he agreed to come along. Tensions between Gary and Maria still lingered. Their interactions had remained distant in the weeks following her return to work. Despite everything, Maria continued to visit Debbie regularly. Every time she drove to her friend's neighborhood in their old Chevrolet station wagon, she felt increasingly out of place. Debbie lived in an upscale area where almost everyone drove high-end vehicles. The contrast made Maria more aware of Gary's resistance to change and the growing discomfort between them. Maria had always respected Gary's practicality, but lately, she found herself desiring more, whether it was a newer car, a more modern home, or even simply the sense of aspiration that others around her seemed to embrace. She could sense that Gary noticed her shifting expectations, and that awareness added to the quiet strain between them. Still, she had never imagined her life would take this turn. She was grateful for what she had, but the quiet envy stirred by Debbie's lifestyle, and now by James Wilkins' hospitality, was difficult to ignore. Earlier, when Maria returned to work 2 weeks after Steve Martin's sudden passing, she was introduced to her new supervisor, James Wilkins. He was 48 years old, stood about 6 feet 2 inches tall, had an average build, and weighed around 90 kilograms. Divorced, he carried himself with confidence and charm. He had risen through the ranks of a competing firm before being hired by Cutler. Maria immediately sensed something unusual. When James introduced himself, she felt a flutter of nervous excitement, something she hadn't experienced since her early days with Gary. She dismissed the feeling as inappropriate. After all, she was a married woman. Still, she noticed how Debbie began to openly flirt with James, acting with little subtlety. Once or twice, it even seemed like Debbie was on the verge of directly inviting James to spend time with her outside the office. James never encouraged these advances. Each time Debbie walked away, he would roll his eyes or shake his head slightly. A few times, Maria caught him looking at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. He was always respectful in their conversations, never demanding or unprofessional. Maria began to wonder if perhaps he had taken an interest in her. At 35, and after giving birth to 2 children, Maria had retained a petite figure. She was only slightly taller than she had been in high school and weighed around 52 kilograms. Her dark brown hair now reached just below her shoulders, and there was an understated innocence in her manner that contrasted sharply with Debbie's overt, glamorous appearance. Though Maria had never considered herself especially attractive, she had noticed subtle changes in how some people treated her, and now she found herself at the center of attention in ways she hadn't expected. James's invitation to the office barbecue was generous and inclusive. He had clearly gone to great lengths to make everyone feel welcome. But for Maria, the event would come to represent more than just a pleasant summer gathering. It would mark the beginning of a series of personal reflections and changes in the way she viewed her life, her marriage, and the future she wanted. Debbie's home had already made Maria feel somewhat self-conscious about her own, but James's residence took those feelings to another level. The house had been completed just 2 weeks before James moved in, offering an astounding 3,485 square feet of space. It was the epitome of modern luxury: walnut floors, 8-foot doors, soaring ceilings ranging from 11 to 12 feet, and a spacious living room complete with a fireplace and bar. The gourmet kitchen featured a large center island, top-of-the-line appliances, and a dining area that opened to a covered patio. Maria was stunned. She could hardly believe such a home was real. "God, what I would do to live in a house like this," she whispered to Gary as they continued their tour. The home also included a private office and a formal dining room with elegant French doors that opened onto a deck. When James noticed Maria and her family, his face lit up with warmth as if he were greeting old friends. He approached them with an easy smile. "Mrs. Arthur, this is my husband Gary, and our sons, Joshua and Jacob," Maria said, introducing her family. "Please, just call me James," he replied, shaking all their hands. "It's very nice to meet the Arthurs. You have a wonderful woman in your life. She's irreplaceable to us, and we all truly appreciate her." James then led them to the backyard, which was just as impressive. The house sat on 4 acres of land. The yard featured a large heated swimming pool, measuring 25 by 50 feet, a jacuzzi, and a walkway that led to a private tennis court. The food was catered by Schnitzelbank Catering, a service from Jasper, Indiana, and it was excellent. It was an unusually warm May afternoon in Ohio, with temperatures reaching 85 degrees Fahrenheit. After everyone had eaten and enjoyed some friendly conversation, James invited anyone who wanted to swim to do so. He explained that guests could change in a poolside annex and that the area had a bar, tables, and lounge chairs for everyone to relax. He also said he planned to take a quick swim himself. Joshua and Jacob had worn swim trunks under their clothes and were the first to dive into the pool. Gary changed into a pair of shorts and found a spot to relax by the water. Maria had brought a swimsuit as well and settled into a chair next to him. Debbie came alone, explaining that her husband Mark was away on business. She chose a very eye-catching swimsuit that drew a lot of attention. A few moments later, James stepped outside in his swim trunks. Debbie quickly moved to stand beside him and stayed close to him for most of the afternoon. Maria noticed that James appeared very fit and athletic, with a healthy tan and a confident demeanor. She felt a little embarrassed when she realized that his swimwear accentuated his physique more than she had expected. She quickly turned her focus back to her family and the other guests. As the afternoon continued, the guests mingled, swam, and enjoyed the beautiful setting. At one point, Debbie excused herself to go inside. Around the same time, Maria stood up to get drinks for herself and Gary. James was already at the outdoor bar. "Your boys look like they're having a great time," he said with a friendly smile. "Yes, they're really enjoying themselves." "Your home is absolutely beautiful," Maria replied. "Would you like a full tour?" James offered. "We've already seen most of it," she replied, hesitating. "Well, why don't you come inside? There are a few more things I'd like to show you," he said with a kind, professional tone, lightly guiding her by the hand. Inside, he showed her a small office just off the kitchen. "I haven't decided whether this will be a storage room or a home office yet," he explained. Next to the office was a large laundry room, complete with a guest entrance that led to a staircase. Upstairs, he showed her 2 spacious guest bedrooms, each with its own private bathroom and dressing room. "This is all incredibly beautiful," Maria said in awe. "Just wait," James smiled, leading her toward the master bedroom. At the end of the hall, he opened the door to a luxurious suite, complete with a spa-like bathroom that featured elegant stone finishes, a soaking tub, and a glass-enclosed shower. The house also featured a massive walk-in closet and a stylish powder room. James then led Maria into the spacious 3-car garage. Inside were 2 pristine vehicles, a brand-new 1990 Mercedes 300e sedan and a gleaming Corvette ZR1. "I hope you don't think I'm being too curious, but do you really live in this big house all by yourself?" Maria asked. "Yes, for now," James replied with a smile. "But I hope there will be a new Mrs. Wilkins one day soon," he added, looking at her intently. As they returned to the pool area, Debbie spotted them together and quickly approached. She gave Maria a look that felt unfriendly, as if Maria had crossed some invisible line. Maria was confused by her coldness. Debbie then took James by the hand and pulled him away. James turned back for a moment, gave Maria a playful grin, and rolled his eyes. Maria couldn't help but smile. Maria walked to the bar, picked up drinks for herself and Gary, and then made her way back to where he was sitting. As she approached, she looked at her husband. He was still the same man she had known since their youth, tall, lean, with a familiar farmer's tan from working outdoors in city maintenance. His chest and legs, which rarely saw sunlight, remained pale. James, by contrast, was muscular, evenly tanned, and striking in appearance. He had a commanding presence that reminded Maria of a figure from mythology. As she returned to Gary, she found herself briefly reflecting on the differences between their lives, the modest house she lived in, the older car she drove, and the contrast of James's large home, expensive vehicles, and confident demeanor. Gary asked why it had taken her so long. "James gave me a tour of the house," she said. Gary didn't respond. It was clear he wasn't thrilled, but he let it go. In the days that followed, Maria and Gary began to feel distant from each other. Though they continued with their daily routines and moments of intimacy, Maria found her thoughts drifting elsewhere. Gary noticed the change. He tried to talk with her, to reconnect, but Maria often seemed distracted, caught up in her own world. Hoping to ease the growing tension and provide more for his family, Gary reached out to the public relations manager at Cutler, a local company, to ask about job opportunities. He also considered other factory jobs in town. Eventually, he secured a position at Cutler, though it was the evening shift, from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. He was told that a day shift might open up in the future. Maria seemed pleased by this development, but emotionally, she remained distant. She lost interest in decorating their home and stopped talking about the new car she once wanted. Even her relationship with Debbie changed. Though Debbie remained polite, she made it clear that Maria should keep her distance from James. One day, Debbie confronted her directly. "I'm not interested in James," Maria insisted. "I saw how the two of you looked at each other at the party," Debbie said sharply. "He gave you a personal tour of his house. He didn't do that for anyone else, not even me, and I practically asked him to. He chose you, a married woman, a housewife. I'm his personal secretary. I've worked with him for years. Gary and I used to have dinner with my old boss all the time. It's really not that important." "Yes," Debbie replied bitterly, "but did your boss ever look at you the way James looks at you? You may be married, but you still act like you want him." "I really don't want to have this conversation," Maria said, trying to end it. After that confrontation, their relationship cooled significantly. They barely spoke again, and Maria never returned to Debbie's home. She couldn't understand why Debbie was so upset Maria had no intention of pursuing James. A month later, Gary had settled into his new job. He had made friends among his coworkers and even began going out with them occasionally. A couple of times a week, after finishing his shift around 11:20 p.m., he would stop by a local bar called Oinks. Maria didn't mind. She remained withdrawn and deep in thought most days. One day, Gary came across a used 1988 Chrysler Jeep Cherokee at a local dealership. It had low mileage and was in excellent condition. As it turned out, the seller was an old high school friend of Gary's who offered him a good deal. The seller offered Gary a great price on the Jeep if he traded in their old station wagon. Before finalizing anything, Gary decided to show the car to Maria. He drove to the office where she worked, but the receptionist told him that Maria had left for lunch with Mr. Wilkins at 11:30 a.m. Gary waited until 1 p.m., but they never returned. Disheartened, he drove the Jeep back to the dealership and told his friend not to hold the car for him. That day, Gary found it difficult to concentrate at work. Everything felt off. When he returned home at 11:20 p.m., he found Maria lying in bed, pretending to be asleep. She was actually thinking about her lunch with James. Gary took a shower and lay down beside her, turning away instead of embracing her as he usually did. Earlier that day, James had invited Maria to lunch. She initially declined, saying she had brought her own meal. But James insisted, telling her she would enjoy it. He invited her to one of the city's most upscale restaurants, Desiderio. "I can't afford that place," Maria said, surprised. "The average bill there is over $100. "My treat," James replied. "Please join me so I don't have to eat alone." "Are you sure?" Maria asked, hesitant. "That's a very expensive place." "I insist," James said. "It would be my pleasure. You're a valuable part of our team and bring real value to the company. You deserve this." "Well, if you put it that way, how can I say no? I've always dreamed of going there," she admitted. James arrived at the office in his Mercedes. He walked Maria to the car and opened the door for her. Inside, she was struck by the luxury, soft leather seats and elegant wood trim. She had never ridden in such a high-end car before. 15 minutes later, they arrived at the restaurant. James stepped out, walked around the car, and opened the door for her once more. He offered his arm, and together they walked inside to a reserved table in a quiet, softly lit corner. "Don't be shy," James said with a smile. "Order anything you like. Money is not an issue." Maria, still slightly overwhelmed, ordered filet mignon with a signature salad and a lobster appetizer. For dessert, she chose a slice of chocolate mousse cake, which turned out to be incredibly delicious, the best meal she had ever had. After the meal, they lingered in conversation under the soft lighting. James asked Maria about her life, her childhood, her interests, and her dreams. He carefully avoided asking about her marriage or her husband, Gary. Looking into her eyes, he gently took her hands and said, "You're truly beautiful." Maria blushed. She felt nervous but flattered by the attention. James slowly leaned in, still holding her hands. Then, letting go with one hand, he gently placed his arm around her shoulders. Before Maria fully realized what was happening, they shared a kiss. They remained close for a while, talking quietly and sharing a moment of emotional intimacy. Maria was overwhelmed by the unfamiliar feelings and the tenderness in his gestures. Everything about the moment felt new, intense, and emotionally stirring. There was a lingering sense of nervous excitement as Maria and James returned to the office around 1:45 p.m. Maria was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't hear the receptionist mention Gary had stopped by. However, Debbie, one of their coworkers, noticed how long Maria and James had been gone and looked displeased. Later that night, as Maria lay in bed, she reflected on the situation. She thought about how much she loved Gary and how she should have felt ashamed for what happened during lunch. But instead of guilt, all she felt was a rush of excitement. She couldn't stop thinking about James. The next morning, Saturday, both Gary and Maria had the day off. Gary woke up at 8 a.m., but Maria, who had trouble sleeping, stayed in bed until nearly 11. When she finally walked into the kitchen, Gary was waiting for her. "Did the receptionist at your office tell you I stopped by yesterday around noon?" he asked. Maria looked at him in surprise, remembering that someone had said something, but she had been too distracted to register it. She might have. "I wasn't really paying attention," she admitted. "Then why did you go out with your boss?" Gary asked. "He didn't mention the Jeep. Instead, he said he had wanted to take her to dinner." Maria hesitated but then decided to tell him. "James took me to Desiderio. It was, honestly, the best meal of my life. A place we probably couldn't afford." Gary looked at her for a long moment before replying, sarcasm in his voice. "Did the dinner come with anything else? That's a pretty fancy place for just a colleague. The receptionist said you didn't come back until over an hour later. You left at 11:30. That means you were gone for nearly 2 hours. Does lunch usually take that long?" "No," Maria replied quickly. "But it wasn't like that. He said I was a valuable employee and deserved a nice lunch as a thank you. And if he invites me again, I'll probably say yes." She wasn't sure what she would do if James invited her again. Part of her didn't want it to go further, but another part was drawn to him, his attention, his confidence, the way he made her feel seen. She spent the rest of the day distracted, replaying moments from their previous outing. That night, when she got ready for bed, she felt unusually excited. Gary, unaware of the emotional storm in her mind, embraced her, and they shared a passionate night together, what would unknowingly be their last true moment of connection. On Monday, James invited Maria out again. It was a different restaurant, but they were again seated in a quiet, dimly lit corner. This time, their interaction remained respectful, though emotionally charged. They shared a lingering conversation, filled with flirtation and tension, before returning to the office an hour later. That evening, Gary stopped by the pub for a couple of drinks after work. When he got home and into bed around 12:30, he held Maria close as he fell asleep, still oblivious to the distance growing between them. By Thursday, James invited her out once more. Again, it was a different place, and again, they found themselves in a quiet corner. The emotional intensity between them continued to build. James whispered compliments and personal thoughts, and Maria found herself drawn in, feeling both nervous and exhilarated. At one point, Maria reached for his hand under the table. Their closeness blurred the lines of professionalism and friendship. Their conversation slowed, and their glances lingered. "I want to be closer to you," Maria whispered softly. James didn't say anything right away. He simply gave her a look of quiet understanding, his expression calm but filled with meaning. They returned to the office at 1:30 p.m. Debbie saw Maria and gave her a knowing smile, shaking her head. Later that day, Debbie approached her. "You're seeing him, aren't you?" "No, not exactly," Maria replied. "But maybe soon." Debbie laughed knowingly. "I saw how you two looked at each other at the office party. I knew something was going on." Maria was slightly surprised by Debbie's attitude. Just recently, she had seemed upset, possibly jealous. But now, she seemed oddly amused. That weekend, Maria told Gary she wasn't feeling well. They didn't share any intimacy. On Monday, James invited her out again, this time for lunch. As they left the building at 11:30, he told the receptionist they had a meeting and might be gone a while. Maria was confused when James drove in the opposite direction of the city. A few minutes later, he pulled into a private garage. Maria didn't ask questions, she just smiled. James led her inside his house, where the atmosphere was quiet and refined. The emotional tension between them had been growing for days, and in the privacy of his home, it reached its peak. They crossed a line that had been building in silence, one fueled not just by physical desire, but by emotional displacement, longing, and confusion. Their lips met in a gentle kiss, and James softly ran his hands along Maria's back, creating a feeling of warmth and anticipation. He was attentive to every detail, focused on making the moment meaningful and unforgettable. Maria responded with a smile that lit up the room, her laughter filling the air with joy. Their closeness grew with each shared moment, rooted in care and tenderness rather than urgency. They took their time, learning more about one another and deepening their emotional connection. James made sure Maria felt respected and cherished, and she trusted him completely. As their emotions heightened, they found themselves completely immersed in the experience, not just physically, but emotionally as well. It was a moment of vulnerability and sincerity, and when it was over, Maria rested her head on James's chest and whispered, "I could get used to this." And so, a new chapter began between Maria and James. They returned to the office around 2 p.m. Debbie smiled knowingly and gave Maria a playful wink. After work, she approached Maria and said, "He was with you today, wasn't he? I can see it on your face. Was it everything you expected? Is he different from Gary?" Maria blushed and replied, "It was something I've never experienced before, emotionally intense. I think I'll need your help covering for me in the future. I want to see him again." "You're such a rebel," Debbie laughed. "But I get it." The next morning, Maria pulled James aside and told him, "We can't keep meeting at lunch. I think people are starting to notice." Debbie already knows. She said she'd cover for me, but still. James nodded in understanding. Maria continued, "I've been thinking of a new plan. What if I start telling Gary I'm going to yoga at Debbie's on Tuesdays and Thursdays? Then we can meet after work." James smiled. "That works. Should I pick you up from Debbie's place then? That way, your car stays where it's supposed to be." "I'll talk to her," Maria said. "But I think she'll agree. So Tuesdays and Thursdays it is." "Oh, and today is Tuesday. Will you pick me up at 7? She teased. Later that day, Maria called Gary. "Debbie and I are starting yoga classes at her house on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You don't mind, do you?" "If that's what you need, go ahead," Gary replied. "Just make sure Josh and Jake are supervised." "Of course," she said. "I'll go home first to check on them before I head over." "I love you. Thank you, dear." Gary hesitated for a moment before hanging up. Something about Maria reconnecting with Debbie made him uneasy. Debbie had once encouraged Maria to think more independently, which had led to their only serious disagreement during their marriage. When Maria asked Debbie about parking her car at her house, Debbie agreed, but insisted on one condition. "I need James's number. If anyone comes looking for you, I'll call his phone and let it ring twice, hang up, then repeat it. That'll be our signal. Make sure you call me back immediately if that happens, okay? And don't forget to tell James about it too." "I didn't even think of that," Maria replied. On her way home, Maria stopped by a shopping center and picked up some athletic wear for yoga. She also bought a new outfit to feel confident and refreshed. After showering and changing, she placed her workout clothes in a small bag and prepared to leave. She told her sons, "I'm heading to yoga with a friend. If I'm not back in time, your curfew is still 10. Lock the door and behave yourselves. Love you both." As she walked out, a brief wave of guilt hit her, but it quickly passed. Her heart raced as she drove to Debbie's. Her thoughts were conflicted, but her emotions were already stirring. She arrived a few minutes before James and greeted Debbie at the door. "I got something new for tonight," Maria whispered with a shy smile, unzipping the bag to reveal her yoga gear. "You look amazing," Debbie said warmly. Maria was surprised when James arrived in his Corvette. He walked around the car and opened the door for her. As Maria stepped out to meet him, Debbie watched with amazement. She knew about James's Mercedes but had never heard of the Corvette. "You have done well, honey," Debbie whispered to herself as she closed the door. James took Maria to his home, where they shared a long evening filled with warmth and affection. He was attentive to her every need, and Maria experienced feelings she had never known before. She had not imagined such closeness was possible. When James dropped Maria off at her car a little before 11 o'clock, Debbie was already waiting for her. "Well, friend, how did it go? Did he treat you well?" Debbie asked with a playful smile. "Oh my goodness, I can barely walk," Maria replied. "I have missed out on so much over the past 15 years. Maria hurried home and arrived at 10:55 p.m. After taking a refreshing shower, she thought about the evening she had just spent with James. It had been full of kindness and tenderness. He surprised her with his gentle touch and paid close attention to her every wish. Their time together was sincere and opened new feelings for her. At the end of the evening, he gave her moments of deep connection, ending with a respectful and tender embrace. After finishing her shower, Maria quickly checked on her sons and then went to bed, pretending to be asleep when Gary came home from work. When he got into bed, he hugged her, unaware that just a few hours earlier, she had shared a very special evening with another man. Lying in Gary's arms, Maria wished James was beside her. Even though she still cared for her husband, she realized their marriage was coming to an end. She had quickly fallen in love with James, a mature, confident man who seemed able to fulfill her emotional needs in ways Gary no longer could. Compared to James, Gary felt like a young boy. Although Gary could still please her, he did so only once, while James had been more attentive and persistent. She had to leave and return home by Thursday. Everything happened again on Thursday evening. After they finished, James surprised Maria by saying, "You still need to be close with Gary to keep things normal and enjoy your time with him." "But I do not want to," Maria interrupted. "He is not even close to you." James responded calmly, "We do not want him to suspect anything, do we? That could cause big problems for us. Have you forgotten that he also works for Cackler?" Maria thought for a moment and then said, "I just do not know. I think of it as a kind farewell gift for him. He has taken care of you for the past 15 years and gave you 2 beautiful boys, did he not?" James smiled. "I think you are right. I can give him a few kind moments." Maria laughed softly. Over the next few weeks, Tuesdays and Thursdays became special days filled with joy and connection for Maria. On the weekends, she spent time with Gary and even enjoyed their moments together. She made sure he felt cared for. Gary was pleased but puzzled. He suspected that Debbie and Maria had discussed something, and that Debbie might have given Maria some advice. 3 weeks later, Gary took his Jeep Cherokee to the Cackler dealership to show it to Maria. While returning home from work, Maria's phone rang. "Hello, this is Paul Jenkins from Chrysler Center of Fords. Is this Arthur's house?" "Yes, this is Maria Arthur. How can I help you?" Maria answered, wondering where the call was going. "Are you Gary Arthur's wife, Mrs. Arthur?" Paul asked. "Yes, I am," Maria replied. "A few weeks ago, Gary brought a 1988 Jeep Cherokee to your workplace so you could take a look at it, right?" Paul clarified. Maria thought carefully about how to answer. She wanted to understand his purpose and decided to continue the conversation. "Yes, exactly. I was very busy then and only saw him briefly. I cannot remember all the details. Could you tell me more?" she asked politely. "Certainly," Paul said. "This is a one-owner car in excellent condition. It is a 1988 Jeep Cherokee Limited, inline 6 model, 4-door. It features a Sealing-Track all-wheel drive system that engages on the fly. The interior is well maintained and clean. The Jeep Cherokee features full leather seats, power steering, and power brakes. It also includes a center console, a floor-mounted automatic transmission shifter, a premium audio system, and a sunroof. The color is metallic bronze." "You have certainly seen it before," Paul said. "I do not know if Gary told you about the price, but I suggested that he purchase it at wholesale, including your old 1984 Chevy. I need to know what his decision will be because I have other interested buyers." Maria promised to leave a note for Gary so that he could call back in the morning. "Thank you, Mrs. Arthur. Have a nice evening." "Goodbye," Paul said politely. After hanging up, Maria felt a slight pang of guilt. Gary had tried to buy her the car she had dreamed of, but he had never gone through with it. Why would he suspect something? She believed she was carefully hiding all her tracks. The only person who knew about her relationship with James was Debbie. She will not tell Gary, Maria thought. She knows that if she did, I could tell Mark everything about her adventures, and then she would lose her source of comfort. Maria decided not to mention the phone call to Gary. If he happened to call and mention it, she would simply say that she forgot to send a message. On Saturday night, Gary received another thoughtful gesture as a token of gratitude for his effort to please her. Meanwhile, James became increasingly curious about the details of Maria's intimate life with Gary. It was James who suggested that Maria swallow, so that her husband would not suspect anything. Tuesdays and Thursdays continued to be filled with passion and experimentation. Maria and James explored role-playing games and practiced light bondage. James purchased many items to enhance their time together. Maria's 36th birthday fell on a Tuesday in September. James invited Maria to lunch at Desiderio. Later that evening, after picking her up from Debbie's house and taking her to his home, he parked in the driveway. Maria found this unusual but did not say anything. After their night of love, James and Maria got into his car to pick up her vehicle at Debbie's. James started the Mercedes and told Maria to close her eyes for a moment. Opening the garage door, he drove inside and asked Maria to turn her head to the right and open her eyes. There, parked in the garage next to them, was a brand new 1991 Jeep Cherokee Briarwood, fully loaded in canyon blue metallic. "Happy birthday, Maria," James said, handing her the car keys. "It is yours." Maria's eyes opened wide, and she hugged him. "Oh my goodness. Is that mine?" she exclaimed. "I love you, James. But would that not make Gary suspicious? Did you buy me a new car?" "You can tell him it is a company car, so the company's best secretary can get to work in the winter," James replied with a smile. "Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you," Maria exclaimed happily. Maria got out of the car to inspect the gift. She opened the door, sat inside, checked the soft leather seats, and inhaled the new car smell. She could not believe it. Gary had never done anything like this, and James had kept his promise by giving her a brand new car, not just an older one. Maria was so excited that she lost track of time. She looked at her watch. It was 11:30 p.m. "Oh, I need to get home. Gary is there, and I am not. How can I get the Cherokee home? Would it not seem strange to drive it at this hour? Wind up your window and follow me to Debbie's house. I have a plan. Just let me take care of it," James said. Maria followed James to Debbie's house. When they arrived, he asked her to call Debbie outside, as she would be needed to carry out the plan. As Maria and Debbie left the house, James announced, "Here is how we will do this. Maria, you will drive home in your old car. I will drive the Cherokee, and Debbie will follow us in her car. When we get to Maria's house, we will tell Gary that we had a surprise for Maria's birthday." Debbie smiled. "Is everyone clear?" James asked. Both women nodded in agreement. "Then you two will pretend that the Cherokee is my car, and that I need to talk to Gary. Say that you knew he should be back soon. Here is the important part, Maria. When I talk to Gary, you need to look truly surprised and joyful. Do you understand me?" "Yes, but what are you going to say?" Maria asked. "Just follow me, and you will understand," James replied. The three of them drove to Maria and Gary's house. Maria felt a little nervous, afraid that James might accidentally reveal their relationship. When they arrived, James told Maria to go inside and call Gary. She had to wait until he came out of the shower. Gary came out of the bathroom and saw Maria. "Where have you been?" "It is almost midnight," he asked. "After practice, Debbie and the girls from work gave me a birthday surprise. Mr. Wilkins came and said he wanted to talk to you. He said I need to go to his office tomorrow." Gary interrupted. "No, he is outside." Gary's face showed fear. Why would the CEO of the company where he works come to his house in the middle of the night? What does he want? Gary asked himself. "You are his secretary. Do you not know? Did I do something wrong?" James parked the Cherokee right behind Maria's old station wagon. Gary immediately noticed the new car and began to look at it carefully. Not bad, he thought. "Ah, Mr. Arthur, may I call you Gary?" James asked, holding out his hand. Gary nodded and shook hands, too nervous to speak. "I see you like the Jeep. I noticed the way you were looking at it when you came out," James said. "Your wife is a valuable employee of Cutler Industries. In all my years of working with secretaries, I will say that your wife is the best of all. This was supposed to be a surprise until tomorrow, but today is her birthday. Well, you know how harsh our winters are. We need our best employees to be able to get to work in any weather. In recognition of her service, and on behalf of Cutler Industries, I want to give this 1991 Jeep Cherokee Briarwood to you. Happy birthday, Maria," James said, handing her the keys. Maria jumped for joy and hugged James. "Oh, thank you, Mr. Wilkins. I thought my husband was looking for something like this, but now he will not have to," she said. Gary was a little confused by her words, but was almost as excited as she was. He thanked Mr. Wilkins and shook his hand. They said their goodbyes, and James got into Debbie's car and drove away. Gary looked at Maria and said, "I think your friend is cheating on her husband with your boss. What do you think?" "Maybe. I do not know. We do not discuss that," Maria answered. "Hey, since we are both awake, how about we have some fun?" Gary suggested. "I do not think so. I ate a piece of cake, and I felt sick. Besides, I have to get up early for work tomorrow, and I have not even taken a shower yet," Maria replied. This continued on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It was May 1991. Maria and James had been dating for almost a year when James asked if Maria wanted to go to Paris, France, for a few days. "How will I pull this off?" she asked. As with the Jeep, James had already thought of everything. Maria had 3 weeks of vacation, and James scheduled his vacation for the same time. They received their passports without telling anyone. Maria did not tell Gary that she was taking a vacation, saying only that she had to go away for 4 days on business. "You have never traveled before. Why now, all of a sudden?" Gary asked. "Times have changed. We are trying to attract new clients. It is job security for both of us," she said, managing to convince him that this was necessary and beneficial for both of them. On the eve of her departure, Maria made love to Gary. Gary and his wife spent an evening filled with warmth and intimacy, highlighting the deep bond they had built over 16 years of marriage. They enjoyed their closeness and recalled the best moments of their life together. At one point, his wife looked at him with a smile and said, "Gary, I want to give you something special so you can remember this moment and know how grateful I am." Over the years, her words had touched him, and they continued to share tenderness and love, remembering how strong their feelings were at the beginning of their journey. Lying next to him, she allowed herself a tear, remembering how precious these moments were to her. Gary said he could not wait for her to come back so he could do it again. He had been thinking about this for a long time. She did not answer. They fell asleep in each other's arms. The morning came at 6 a.m. on Monday. Her flight was scheduled to leave at 9 a.m. She was going to meet with her boss and other people were around, and it was a 70-minute drive to the airport in Columbus. Gary helped Maria load her bags into the trunk of her Cherokee. There were 8 large suitcases. "Are you sure you do not want to take the kitchen sink with you?" Gary asked, laughing. "Why do women think they need so many things to travel for just 4 days?" He joked. Maria entered the house and kissed each of her sons while they slept. She had a sad expression on her face that Gary could not understand. When she was ready to leave, Gary walked out with her to the car. She hugged him and said goodbye. "Gary, you will always have a special place in my heart. You will be back on Friday, and when you return, maybe we can, well, do it again," he said with a smile. She looked into his eyes, smiled, kissed him, and gently touched his cheek with the fingers of her right hand. Maria got behind the wheel of the Cherokee and took one last look at Gary standing in the driveway of their home. Over the past few weeks, since James suggested the trip to Paris, Maria had come to certain conclusions and made difficult decisions. Backing up, she waved at him and smiled slightly until a single tear rolled down from her right eye. Switching the lever to drive, she pressed the gas pedal and left Gary's life forever. Gary watched her go until she reached the end of the street and stopped at a stop sign. He then saw her turn right instead of left toward Cutler. "Where is she going?" he thought. Perhaps they were supposed to meet somewhere else, he suggested as he walked back into the house. The boys will be on holiday by the time she returns on Friday. Why could they not go next week? He thought. Then I would not have to get up early to send them to school. After the boys ate and boarded the school bus, Gary returned to the bedroom to get some sleep. They had stayed up late, and he had to work in the evening, so the extra sleep was helpful. Entering the bedroom, he looked at the bed, remembering the night of love with Maria. It was one of the best acts of love in a long time. Maybe the chasm that had seemed to widen in their relationship over the last year had begun to fill. After Maria left the house, she went to James's house, where she parked the Jeep in his garage. Maria lied to Gary. Their flight from Columbus was scheduled for 1:40 p.m. The limousine was supposed to pick them up at 11 a.m., which left Maria and James time for morning pleasures before the car arrived. "Did you have a special night with Gary last night?" James asked. "Yes," Maria answered almost sadly. James sensed her mood and told her she did not need to be sad. "Gary spent 16 good years with you, but now it is time to move on. It was meant to be." Now I want to hear all about what you did with him last night, without anything held back. In his bed, Maria told James all the details of her farewell night with Gary. Maria told her story, her voice sometimes breaking with emotion overwhelming her. James listened carefully and tried to support her, sincerely caring about her condition. When she finished, there was a special feeling of closeness and understanding between them. This moment marked the beginning of their new phase, where they both found comfort and support in each other, allowing their feelings to take over. All the worries and doubts that had tormented her earlier gradually faded into the background, giving way to a feeling of warmth and trust. Gary woke up around 10:45 a.m. He remembered the night with Maria and smiled, thinking about how much he loved her and what she had given him. However, deep in his soul, there remained doubts that he could not explain. Something had been wrong for almost a year. Then he remembered some of her words said last evening, and in the morning she had seemed somehow depressed. Her last words repeated in his head, "You will always have a special place in my heart." What on earth did she mean? He said out loud. At the same time, Maria and James stood in the hallway of his house waiting for the limousine. After their morning intimacy, they took a shower together in which they made love again. The limousine arrived right on time, and the driver came to the door. Maria and James headed to the car and kissed passionately in the back seat while the driver loaded their luggage. Maria took only one bag with her. The rest were her clothes and items from the home she shared with Gary. She collected them on Friday evening while Gary was at work. Gary was minding his own business, waiting for 2:30 p.m. to leave for his shift at Cutler. He cooked dinner, ate a little himself, and left the rest for the boys, putting it in the refrigerator with a note asking them not to heat it up until 5:30 or 6 p.m. Gary told the boys not to heat up the food before 5:30 or 6 p.m., knowing that if they ate early, they would get hungry later. A little after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Gary stepped out onto the porch to get the mail when he was suddenly overcome with a sense of loss. He could not explain it. It just came out of nowhere. 20 minutes later, he recovered, locked the house, and went in his Monte Carlo to go to work. As he started the car, he looked at Maria's old Chevy sitting in the driveway. They had not decided yet whether they would sell it or use it in some way. It will make a good fishing machine, he thought. She was still on the move. When Gary arrived at work, he looked in the parking lot of the Cherokee office building for Maria, but she was not there. They probably met somewhere else, he thought as he entered the building. He looked to his right and saw Debbie sitting at her desk. A feeling of unease came over him. Should not she be in Phoenix, Arizona, with Maria and James? He muttered. When she noticed him, her gaze confused him even more. What on earth was that? He thought. Maria and James's plane took off at 1:40 p.m. They were scheduled to stop in New Orleans and then fly directly to Paris. A few minutes later, James invited Maria to look out the window as they flew directly over the small town they both called home. There. See? James exclaimed, pointing to his house. James's house was easy to spot due to its size and distance from nearby houses. Oh, look. This is Maria began, but fell silent. She ran her gaze along the roads and streets from James's house to the city, and although she could not pinpoint which house was hers, she outlined the general area. The plane flew right over her hometown. At that moment, Gary was just standing on the porch getting the mail. Maria also felt the sense of loss as she flew over her hometown, but she could not explain it. It did not last long, and she quickly pushed those thoughts away. Their plane landed in Paris at 8:20 a.m. Tuesday, which was 2:20 a.m. in Ohio. Maria and James checked into the La Royale Monoraffles Hotel at 10 a.m. Although they had slept a little on the plane, they still collapsed on the bed completely exhausted. It was 4 a.m. in Ohio, and Gary was still awake. He felt an inner anxiety that he could not explain, as if he had forgotten to do something. He replayed Maria's words over and over in his head, trying to figure out what he had missed. We will have to have a serious talk when she returns. I have been working at Cutler for a year now, and I have a week off. I think I will take it in a week or two, he said quietly to himself. I know she has 3 weeks off. We can leave the boys with Mom and spend a couple of days together. This thought cheered him up a little, and he even felt some excitement about the upcoming conversation with Maria about his plan when she returned. He fell asleep around 5 o'clock in the morning, but woke up at 6:30 to prepare breakfast for the boys. As soon as they got on the school bus, he went back to bed, setting his alarm for 2 p.m. in case he slept that long. While he slept, he dreamed of Maria. In the dream, he went to Phoenix to surprise her at a hotel, but when he got to her room, she was not there. He went down to the lobby, where he saw Debbie beckoning him to follow her. He followed her from room to room until she led him through the Cutler plant, pointing somewhere ahead. Then he woke up. It was 1:30 p.m. He had an hour left before he had to leave for work. The dream reawakened his doubts and fears, ruining his mood. At 2:40 p.m., on his way to work, thoughts of Maria did not leave him. He wondered what she was doing now and whether she was well. Arriving at work, he noticed Debbie from the office staring at him again while talking on the phone. What on earth is her problem anyway, he thought. Gary checked in and headed to the plant. Maria and James woke up at 3 p.m. They got out of bed and took a shower together, but there were no pranks. That would happen later. They left the hotel around 5 p.m. and arrived for dinner at Elston Door by 6 p.m. Maria ordered butter-poached lobster with cuttlefish ink tagliolini. It seemed to her that it was all a dream, and she was afraid to pinch herself so as not to accidentally wake up. After dinner, they returned to the room, and a little later, they sat without clothes on the balcony, admiring the views of Paris. Maria went inside around 8:45 p.m. to call Debbie at the office. She told her about everything, the hotel, the restaurant, and the beautiful view. Debbie asked if they had already made love in Paris. "We have not made love yet," Maria answered. "When we checked in the morning, we were too tired and slept all day, then went to dinner. Now we are sitting on the balcony without clothes." Maria was on her knees, resting her elbows on the edge of the bed. Talking to Debbie on the phone, James walked up to Maria and put his arm around her waist, gently pulling her towards him. He began to kiss her neck, creating an atmosphere of tenderness and romance. Maria smiled, feeling the warmth of his touch, and continued the conversation with her friend. "Are you okay?" Debbie asked, noticing that Maria's voice had changed. "Yes, everything is fine," she answered, trying not to show her emotions. "Is there something going on there?" Debbie asked, curious. "James just decided to distract me," Maria admitted, slightly embarrassed. "Oh, I get it," Debbie laughed. "Well, I will not distract you. Say hello to him for me." "Definitely. Thank you," Maria answered, smiling and saying goodbye to her friend. When the conversation ended, James hugged her tighter and suggested that they continue the evening together, preparing something special for her. Maria agreed, feeling happy and loved. "Goodbye, Debbie," Maria said. It was James who insisted that she call Debbie at that time. He looked at his watch and timed everything so that Maria would be talking to Debbie on the phone while he would be in bed with her. At that very moment, Gary walked by, wondering if Maria was having a good time. The rest of the week passed in the same way. Gary went about his daily duties while waiting for Maria to return. This was the first time in their 16 years of marriage that they were apart. Friday arrived, and Gary's spirits lifted. Maria's flight was due to arrive at 6 p.m., and she was expected to be home when he returned from work. Will she fall asleep? He wondered, but he did not care. He just wanted to hug her and hold her in his arms. After his shift, he hurried home. Her Jeep was not there. His heart sank. Maybe the flight was delayed. Maybe something happened. Maybe she left the car and someone brought her home, he thought hopefully. He ran to the door and opened it. The house was dark. The boys were sleeping. He went to their bedroom and opened the door. Maria was not there. Dejected, he headed to the shower, hoping she would be home when he came out. While he was in the shower, he could not contain himself. The tears flowed freely. Did she have an accident? Was there a delay? What had happened? Gary stayed in the shower until the water cooled. Then he toweled off halfway and went into the bedroom. He looked at the bed, remembering their last night together. He lay down, staring at the ceiling. He never fell asleep. He was worried all night. Every car passing by, every sound made him get out of bed and look outside. Finally, at 9 a.m., he heard a car door slam and quickly ran to the front door. On the Wednesday before Maria and James traveled, James made an appointment for Maria with Porter Carlson. She took a long lunch break to talk with Mr. Carlson, a prominent divorce lawyer in Columbus. He also had an office in their city, where he worked on Wednesdays. Mr. Carlson explained to Maria that Ohio is a no-fault state, but if either party contests the divorce, they must live apart for at least a year before any agreement can be reached. If property division and child custody issues were settled and both parties agreed to the divorce, the process could take as little as 90 days. Maria filed for divorce, telling Mr. Carlson that the boys would remain with their father and that he would sign the papers without objection. She wanted Gary to be served with the papers at 9 a.m. the following Saturday. She gave Mr. Carlson a letter for Gary and asked that it be delivered at the same time. At that same time, Gary heard the car door slam. Maria was standing on the deck of the Eiffel Tower, admiring the breathtaking view of Paris. Glancing at her watch, she noticed that it was 3 p.m. in Paris, which meant that Gary had just been served with the papers in Ohio. A shadow of guilt flashed across her face, but looking at James, she realized that he was now her future, not that poor boy at home in Ohio. Gary opened the door and Gary saw a young woman holding a large envelope in her hands. Divorce was the last thing on his mind. His heart sank when he thought the woman might have come to report that Maria had been in an accident. "Are you Gary Arthur?" the young woman asked. "Yes," Gary answered coldly. "You have received a notice," she said, handing him a large manila envelope. Then she handed him another smaller envelope. "What is this?" Gary asked as she turned to leave. "Have a nice day, sir," she said, getting into her car and driving away. Gary just stood there watching her drive away. Not knowing anything about how divorces worked, he stared at the large envelope, uncertain about what was inside. Then he looked at the smaller envelope, which had Gary written on the front in Maria's handwriting. He took both envelopes into the bedroom, put the large one aside, and opened the small one first. It was a letter from Maria. He began to read. Underscore 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 underscore. Dear Gary, when you read this letter, you have no doubt already noticed that I am not here. I am in Paris, France, with James. What the hell are they doing there? Have you rescheduled your meeting? He thought anxiously, still not understanding what this really meant. You probably noticed that Debbie did not come with us, and neither did anyone else. It is just me and James. There are no new clients here. I am not on a business trip. James and I are on holiday in France. Gary stopped reading and turned away for a moment, feeling tears welling in his eyes. Gary, I love you, but it is more like loving a brother or sister. It is not you. It is me. I just needed more excitement in my life. It all started the day you brought the Cherokee to show me. James invited me to lunch. I do not know how, but it just happened. He came closer to me, and before I knew what was happening, he kissed me. We were sitting in a dark corner of the restaurant, and he started to touch me intimately. He guided my hand to his groin. It was so big. I cannot explain what was going on in my head at that moment. You asked me if I was sleeping with him because he took me to that fancy restaurant. I did not lie to you. No, I did not sleep with him, at least not yet. You know that I have never been with anyone but you. I felt like I was missing something. I think we got married too early. We both needed to experience more. A few days later, James invited me to lunch at another restaurant. We repeated the same situation, but this time the atmosphere was more open, and this created an even deeper emotional connection between us. At some point, I felt very excited about what was happening and realized that this environment was awakening new feelings in me. Gary, I am so sorry. I realized that I may not have shown those emotions in our relationship, but this was a special situation that helped me realize my desires and discover something new. I want to be honest. Over the past year, I too have tried to express my feelings for you in special moments, although perhaps it was not always so obvious. Gary's tears were flowing freely now. How could she do this? When would she return to him? Did he even want her after what she had allowed her boss to do to her in public? At that moment, Joshua entered the room and saw his father crying. What happened, Dad? Where is Mom? I thought she was supposed to come back last night, he said. I just miss your mom, that is all. She will not be home for a while, Gary said. Jacob was already awake too, so Gary went to the kitchen and made them something for breakfast. He would finish the letter later. The boys came first. He was so distracted that he burned the first couple of eggs he tried to cook. Damn it, Gary said angrily. He could not get thoughts of Maria and James out of his head. Was this a bad dream? Would he wake up soon? He prayed it was so, but he knew it was real. His eyes filled with tears again. Mom will be home later, Joshua told Jacob. What is wrong with Dad? Jacob asked after they finished eating. The boys then went about their business. It was summer break, and their friends were waiting for them at the baseball stadium. Gary returned to the bedroom and took the letter, continuing where he had left off. Underscore 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 underscore. I told him then that I wanted to be intimate with him. The next week, he invited me to lunch again. When we left, he took me to his house, and we spent the night together for the first time. He did things to me that I did not even know were possible. That is how it all started. Gary sat down on the bed and soon began to sob. Oh, Maria, why? When he calmed down a little, he continued reading. For the past year, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, when you thought I was at Debbie's yoga class, I was not there. Those evenings, I was at James's house in his bed. He taught me what real intimacy was. What he did for me and to me was amazing. He is an amazing person. At first, I thought it was all just about intimacy. I still had nights with you, right? But I did not want that after James, with his large size, had a night with me. After all the things he did to me, I was no longer interested in you. James insisted that I continue sleeping with you. That is the kind of person he is. Do you know what he told me? He said that you gave me 15 years of your life and 2 beautiful children, and that I should continue to sleep with you. How do you like that? I would never have slept with you again if it were not for him. Finally, Gary, I have fallen deeply in love with James over the past year. I am leaving the boys with you. I am not going back. I am moving in with James. Please do not fight this. I will only take my clothes. Everything else that we acquired during our marriage remains with you. Even my old 1984 car is yours. By the way, the Cherokee was not a gift from Cutler. It was a gift from James for my birthday. I am sorry, Gary. It was fun, and I appreciate the love you gave me. In fact, I appreciate it. Goodbye, Gary. P.S. I knew you would open this letter first. Now open the large envelope. There are divorce documents inside. Gary got out of bed and walked into the kitchen. He was in shock. He could not think clearly. Was this a dream? Was it real? When the boys arrived home for lunch around 12:30 p.m., they found Gary lying on the kitchen floor in a fetal position. Not knowing what to do, they called their grandmother, who came right away. Seeing her son like that, she called an ambulance and waited. As the paramedics placed Gary on the stretcher, they took the letter from his hand and handed it to her. After Gary was taken away by the paramedics, his mother read the letter and found the envelope. She could not believe it because she had always respected Maria. However, she did not allow the boys to read the letter and told them that their mother would not be returning. She told them to pack their things, as they would be staying with her for a while. Gary spent 2 weeks in the hospital and suffered a nervous breakdown. Cutler kept his job until he recovered. 2 weeks after Maria and James flew to Paris, they returned. Maria moved in with James and never spoke to Gary again. All communication was conducted through her lawyer. At his mother's insistence, Gary did not contest the divorce. She told him that a trial would be too traumatic for him and that Maria had already made all the decisions, so it was pointless. For months later, the divorce was finalized. Maria officially changed her last name back to Srail, erasing Gary from her life as if he had never existed. A week later, Maria and James were married. She became Maria Christina Srail Wilkins, a wonderful name for the wife of a wealthy man. There were rumors in Cutler that James had stolen Gary's wife. Gary occasionally saw James at the plant. Debbie noticed Gary when he came to work in the evenings. She felt sorry for him and even felt a little guilty, thinking that perhaps she had somehow pushed Maria into James's arms. She saw the look on Gary's face and had not realized how much he had loved Maria. That's the end of our first part of the story, but don't worry, there will be a second part of the story soon. See you later.